you know, to have the conversation about, you know, where they're up to at the moment and where they see themselves in the future. It's also been a great opportunity, particularly with the second round of sessions, that we also had the opportunity to do some problem solving, I suppose, through sharing and networking and just the, you know, general support of those that took part in those sessions. So again, I'll encourage you to be involved in this way in whatever way you can. This session, as I said, was based on a 4-hour face-to-face session. It's also compatible with the publication that some of you probably have received by now from the project, and that's we'll talk a little bit more about it down the track, but Creating Our Future is a publication that has now been sent to all services in Australia. Ricky did explain yesterday that if your service doesn't receive one, you can contact the project staff and one will be put in the mail to you. Okay, so I will probably just launch into it at this time. And Ricky's going to support me and assist me with moving through the slides as well. So the next slide is just, again, some background information, I suppose, about the support project and who we are to some degree and what we do. We are funded by the Department of Education, and this project is being managed by New South Wales Family Daycare in partnership with Queensland Family Daycare Association. The project has included to date, and will include some of these elements in the future, has been research, surveys, sector consultation, peak body collaboration, publications, information, sessions, a website, resources, service support, webinars, newsletters and tools. So, you know, I must admit as part of the team, when I look at that list of things that we've put in place in about 5 months, 5.5 months, you know, I think our small team has done quite well. And what has also assisted us, and we must give thanks to the, you know, to the representatives in the sector who took the time to answer surveys, you know, have phone conversations, be part of consultation, you know, provide information to us, and sometimes at short notice too, to help us, yes, put these sessions together, put the publications together, you know, and really try and tap into, again, where the sector is, I suppose, to some degree, right across Australia, and how, you know, representatives are feeling about the changes that are to take place come July 2015. This project will cease at the end of June next year. It was a 12-month contract that we've taken on, and although the webinars will probably continue in some format, depending on the information that we need to share with you, the information sessions that were delivered in different parts of Australia, I think have now finished. We went to all states and territories, first off with the information sessions about I suppose, the black and white details of the changes to the eligibility criteria for the funding, and then more recently the workshop that I spoke of. So we've now finished with that larger work with groups, I suppose, in different parts of Australia. What will happen next year is, again, a variety of methods of supporting the sector, but I suppose more focused on those who will not be eligible for funding and will require perhaps closer support and even one-on-one support. So I can only encourage you to keep an eye on our project website for more information on that, how that will be decided, and you know, what support will be offered down the track. Okay, the next slide, again, I suppose just what we've done with this session, the larger session and the smaller, is followed these parameters of breaking it into 5 parts. We looked at quality, particularly when we did the face-to-face sessions. The first information sessions that went out, as I said, were very much black and white based on the information from the Education Department about the changes. So it was a matter of getting out there into the family daycare community, across Australia, and having that conversation. Did everybody know about the changes? Did they have an understanding? And just again going through some of the nitty-gritties of it, I suppose. These second sessions, workshops that we've put together and have travelled with, have given us the opportunity to also talk with the sector about their concerns, because what we were hearing, and do still to some degree, is generally that there is a concern amongst sector representatives that the cuts to funding, the ineligibility for some services to access funding they've had in the past, or the lessening, I suppose, of what they're going to get compared to what they got in the past because of the capping, has meant that there is a concern about the quality of service provision by services right across Australia. So that's that's a concern that's generally held, and so as I said, it was an opportunity to have that discussion. So we will have a little look at quality today as well. Part 2, the methods of service review. I found it very interesting as I worked with different groups. Look, I don't know what the breakup would be, but perhaps half of the services I spoke to or with said yes, they had been part of some review of their service recently or in the past, or were perhaps planning something. But there was still a large number of services that have never undergone any type of review, and I think particularly in light of the changes that the sector faces and the challenges that will bring with it, it's very, very important that all services do undergo some sort of review, whether it be formal or less informal. But there is an opportunity, and as I said, it's probably the right time to be looking at different aspects of the service, and if change needs to take place. Part 3, options to consider. What we've looked at there are 4 options. First, how to reduce costs is the first thing that we'll look at, and then we look at increasing income, be it through fees and charges or through other means, which is a very tricky thing to do, I've decided. But we do consider that. Also mergers and amalgamations, we'll touch a little bit on that. Financial matters is part 4, and within that what we look at is a break-even budget. Again, majority of services would be working with budgets and probably have a pretty good understanding of them, whether they're putting them together themselves, developing the budget themselves, or whether through an auspicing body they've been given a budget to work with, whatever it might be. So, but having said that, it's I suppose what I've learned also is we can't assume that all services across Australia have the same level of understanding or knowledge or support even in place. So again, we've taken all of that into consideration. So financial matters does include looking at a break-even budget, what the components to some degree of it are, and how you can, I suppose, put forward formulas to work out a break-even budget for your service. With part 3 and part 4 particularly, there is much more information available in the Creating Our Future in the publication that you have been sent. So I really look at this session, as I think I mentioned before, as being compatible. It's not exactly the same as that book, but definitely all of the things that have been addressed here in this session today, in this webinar, will also be addressed in much more detail in the publication. So I encourage you to, whether you're making notes or whatever you're doing, but yes, to definitely follow up with the publication. Part 5, other related topics. There's a variety of things in there, and I always think it's almost like a bit of a disclaimer in so much as it's the things that don't fit in anywhere else, but we thought that they were worth a mention as such. So what's in there is a little bit on change and a little bit on leadership, also sponsors support. Some services do, as I said, have auspicing organisations, so that that might be relevant to you. The other thing is a little conversation around unmet demand, because as we know, all services who believe they will be eligible for the funding in the future, whether they be in regional, remote or in the city, will actually have to address the unmet demand for care and education in their areas. So they're the areas that we've put together, but again, I can only encourage you, whether you, yes, want to throw questions into the mix verbally yourself now, or type them in and Ricky will relay them to us. Again, if there's other things that you want as part of this session, please let us know. Otherwise, we will keep going to the next slide, and what it shows is the front cover of the publication, as I said, that you have been sent, Family Daycare Creating Our Future, a guide for considering your business model. Personally, I've been very proud, although I didn't write this publication, I've been very proud to work with it and also to be able to distribute it in the sessions that I've done, because I think it's a great collection of information, and I have said at quite a few sessions, I think you could almost say it's overdue for the sector as such, and that's how valuable I think it is. Within it is a lot of different information, and like I said, I will be referring it to it today as I move through. But again, we need to thank those that contributed from the sector. What you will find in it, if you haven't yet had a chance to look through it, or you might have been aware of it, but what there is in it is 8 services that were prepared to share specific information with us about their service provision. So what they've shared is, for example, the size of their service, how many educators, how many staff, how many families, what their EFT is, what their levies are, how much there is applied to those levies if they do have them in place, staffing hours, just a whole range of information that we were able to then collate and put forward to you for benchmarking. And as a review, we'll talk about benchmarking in the future. So, to me that's invaluable information, because some of you as service providers and staff may have networking opportunities. You may be able to talk to other family daycare services and have some knowledge of, how their service operates in that way, and what their information would be in light of those components of service provision. But there are a lot of services also who are isolated, who won't necessarily have those opportunities for those discussions. So we've very much, been, as I said, very happy to collate that information and put it together for you to share it. The other part of it, along with a lot of other things, is 10 services who were prepared to share information that we could put forward as case studies. So there's 10 different services. We have for-profit, not-for-profit, council-sponsored, community-based, different service types as such, or methods of structure or whatever, that again have been prepared to share the information so we can pass it on to you. So again, that makes good information for benchmarking and I suppose understanding how different services do operate and have been operating. Also within both of those sections, the service providers have sometimes shared about how they think they'll be moving forward in the future, changes that they may be making as well. So again, good reading. This publication is also available as a PDF on our website, so if you wanted to encourage any others, just say stakeholders of your service, you could definitely direct them that way to have a look at it. I must admit, as I've travelled around and handed it out, I've really encouraged service providers and staff to to share it with the team and to really encourage people to get pens and highlighters out and look through and highlight information that is worthy of discussion. There's lots of ideas when you're looking for encouragement, I suppose, or stimulation for conversation or change. I think you will find quite a bit in it. So I can only encourage you again to share it with others It's not, to me, it's not the publication that goes on the bottom of the pile on your desk, even in busy times. You know, keep popping it to the top and sharing it with others. So the next slide just relates to the community support project, and again, just going over some of the basics. From April 2014, New Family Daycare Services commenced assessment under the revised eligibility criteria, and as you are all aware, all existing family daycare services will be assessed under the revised guidelines from July 2015. Services who believe they are eligible to receive the CSP funding can apply in April 2015. To my knowledge, applications won't be received, or the department is not expecting to receive any prior to that, or probably won't be acting on them if they do. So April 2015. Eligible services will be offered a 12-month contract, and being aware though that if something did change within that 12 months, as in the changes within meeting that eligibility criteria as such, that could affect that contract within that period of time. An annual cap of $250,000 will be placed on CSP operational support payments for all family daycare services. The next slide again alludes to the eligibility criteria, which I'm hoping everybody's very, very aware of and clear of. A service must be either a regional or remote area, which is an SA2, or within a city location that's highly socio-economically disadvantaged, so that's an SA3. The services must be the sole provider of family daycare in the area, and that is, you know, whether they be SA2s or SA3s. The services must show evidence that there's an unmet demand for education and care. So in other words, any services that believe that they will be eligible for funding in the future must put together with their application information on that unmet demand. Services can conduct a self-assessment by accessing current lists from the Education Department website. Again, important that you, I suppose, keep an eye on those lists, because there will be changes over time. The department, I believe, put the first lot of lists out in, I think, June of this year, June-July of this year, and then they were updated probably about 3 months later, and probably are just about due to be updated again. So it doesn't mean that things are going to change with the eligibility criteria. That won't happen as such. But what will happen is movement or change within the sector itself. So in other words, there may be services that open in certain areas, there may be services that close or you know, amalgamate with others, or whatever it might be. So just keeping that in mind, that those lists will change at different times too. Okay, the next slide. Very much a disclaimer. All information provided in this session is generic. Service providers must ensure they abide by laws, regulations, policies, employment agreements, organisational contracts, etc. when making any changes to their service structure or provision. And again, as you would be aware, you know, if some changes are minor and are done in-house as such, and you know, there's no ramifications from that, other changes of a more major nature may mean that you have to contact the department or your state body as such to let them know of the changes you're going to make. So being aware of you know, how you're regulated in that way, and also the time frames that you need to give for any changes to your service. All right. I think now, again, you know, if anybody has questions, I'm happy to take them now, or again, if there's information that you kind of want included in this session, you could suggest that now.
There haven't been any questions through the question box. Just a reminder to everyone, it's just on the right-hand side. I've muted some people who are, there's a lot of background noise, so if you're unable to talk, either send a question through and I'll unmute you, or yeah, that's probably the reason why you're unable to talk.
Yes, as I said before, some of those microphones can be very sensitive and picking up background noises that you're not necessarily aware of yourself. Well, in that case, what we'll do is keep moving forward. Again, I'm watching the clock and understanding people are busy and have only allocated X amount of time to this. So again, question of quality. The next slide has, I suppose, just a prompt for us. As the family daycare sector plan for and adjust to changes to their financial situation, it is important that we have a discussion about quality. And again, you know, recognising that there seems to be a shared concern at different levels, though I must have written it about different things, with the family daycare sector, that these funding cuts, whether they be to individual services or just, again, generally, you know, things are changing within family daycare, and that could also have an effect on the quality of service provision. And again, we're totally understanding that, and that's been a worthwhile discussion to have. But I think something that's been highlighted to me again with my discussions with different sector representatives is that, you know, we all consider quality differently. You know, there's commonalities there and there's also differences there, or I suppose it's almost the grading of quality or how much focus we put on certain parts of service provision, you know, and or the importance we place on different parts of our service provision, and again, you know, how that relates to quality. I think the next slide shows a quote there that is quite good. Quality in a service or product is not what you put into it, it's what the client or customer gets out of it. And I think that's a worthwhile quote in so much as it reminds us that, that we will have a perspective on quality, but that's only one perspective. And it really, I believe, again, particularly as part of any service review, is that we need to have that conversation about quality with the stakeholders of our services, with the educators, with the families, with the staff, you know. And again, if we do have larger organisations that we are sponsored by or umbrellaed under, you know, also having that discussion, because that could well reflect community opinion on quality too. So, because otherwise I think what can well happen is we can come from one perspective without yes, really taking into others' opinions, you know, about quality, and also therefore, you know, making those decisions. How are we making decisions? What are we basing them on? What kind of discussions have we had? Because as it says, that last sentence, it's what the client or customer gets out of it. Well, that's really asking what is their experience. So what is the educator's experience with our family daycare service? What is the family's experience? So what do they think is important? What do they think quality is? So it's a matter, like I said, of reaching out and having those conversations. And I think the best thing we can do in respect of that too, and again, I'm recognising that a lot of services are, you know, sometimes stretched to the limits, and staff may be feeling that as well, but finding the time to have those conversations. And services seem to be using a variety of methods of reaching out and you know, asking questions, I suppose, of their stakeholders. Emails seem to work quite well, as do surveys, you know, particularly with busy family members as such, you know, and a lot will use some, you know, a tool like SurveyMonkey, that type of thing, where the questions are quite limited as such, so you're not overtaxing people. I think we need to keep in mind those surveys serve a purpose in so much as they're often closed questions, that we're just looking for a yes or no answer. And sometimes, which is great and can work, but sometimes we actually might need more information to work with. So I still encourage services to make you know, very, very, I suppose, direct contact, particularly with families. Educators, you know, we see more of them, we talk to them more frequently, so I suppose there's more opportunity there to ask them about, you know, their experience and their take on quality. But families, often when the enrolment's done, we don't necessarily, as a coordination unit, have a lot more interaction with them. I think a proactive approach is really encouraged there, because what we don't want is that next line of communication with the families being when they're perhaps not happy with the service they've received, or they have, complaints or something like that. If we can get in and have conversations with them prior to that and build some kind of a relationship, I think that's very valuable and very important. Our relationships, of course, will be different than those that they have with the educators. But again, I think what we do want is if families have questions or if there are concerns or whatever it might be, that they actually know who to contact, how, and perhaps have a name or have already had some contact with somebody from the service, so that kind of opens up that communication. Some services are doing random calls of families, feeling that they can't necessarily contact all of their families, so they're selecting some, to have different conversations with them, or to focus on different parts of service provision, again, just to hear about what their experience is. So again, only be encouraged as a valuable tool, that one-on-one conversation when you have the chance. The next slide, another quote. This one is taken from a report that was written by Penny Gordon, and it's a journey to excellence, which is about Wynnum Family Daycare in Brisbane, Queensland. And Wynnum, Penny wrote the report, or put the report together earlier this year, but I think it was last year that Wynnum were the first family daycare service in Australia to receive an excellent rating under the rating and assessment that we now work with. Which was absolutely fantastic. But when you read this report, The Journey to Excellence, you'll see that their journey definitely started a good 10 years before, that the changes they made in their service, which were fairly broad, really, when you pull the report apart, yes, I suppose they looked at all areas of their service provision. They looked at the team they had, the educators. They looked at what quality was, what the community that they supported. They looked at all of those things, and also, I suppose, their philosophy as well, to see where they sat at that time and where they wanted to be. So they did decide to make some changes and address some of those things that came out from a thorough service review. So it's a great report to read, and particularly I think it's relevant to the sector with what we're going through at the moment. And because, again, as you would have caught on, I'm an advocate of service reviews, because I think that's a proactive measure. I think rather than waiting for things to happen and just being totally reactive all the time, is that we have to put things in place. And so this gives some encouragement for us to look at a service which wasn't a large service by any means, but definitely took that proactive approach. They were very, very gracious in allowing us to have access to the report, and we have placed it on our project website. It is fairly detailed, and I'm trying to think, I think it's 20-something pages long, so it's one of those things, if you do get a chance to have a look at it and have a read through, it does have, statistical information there from the service, as well as, that they tell their story, or Penny tells their story about how they made the changes and how they got to where they wanted to be, I suppose. So I do encourage you to have a look at that. The quote that has been taken out of it: in order to introduce new ways of perceiving and operating services, old ways of perceiving and operating family daycare needed to be reviewed, challenged, and at times changed. And again, I just think that speaks volumes for where the sector is up to at the moment. And I'm well aware, having a background in children's services for over 35 years and for quite a few years now working with the family daycare sector, I'm well aware of the changes that have already taken place over the years. And I'm also aware of, I suppose, the resilience of family daycare as a valuable model, and resilience of the people within family daycare to really ride those waves of change and continually to rise to challenges. And I suppose to some degree, this is what's being asked of us again. So again, the Wynnum Family Daycare report really addressed that opportunity for review and facing the challenges. Okay, the next slide. No, already time for questions again, if anybody has any. No?
Sorry, Nikki, there haven't been any more in the question box.
No, that's fine. All good.
Okay.
Good. Okay, cool. We'll keep moving forward. Okay, part 2, methods of review. And the next slide, again, is very, very simple in respect of 4 simple steps for considering review. Review your service, which, you know, is actually a fairly big thing to do, and any of you that have been through service reviews before, and again, whether they be formal or more informal, would be aware that they can be quite a large undertaking as such, and a bit of support goes a long way as well. I think with reviewing your service, what is often a good thing to do is to look at service provision as such, so break it down into manageable amounts rather than just holistically, which you know just could be too large an undertaking. So it might be that yes, you're looking definitely at the budget, but also what's influencing the budget. So it might be that as you know, siloing different components of service provision, you look at the support to educators. You know, how many educators you have, how many staff, how many visits do educators have, you know, how long do those visits take. I know within the Productivity Commission and the reports that have followed it and information that's followed, yeah, they've been talking about you know, possible ratios of coordinators to educators. Well, you know, it's a worthwhile thing for you now to be considering how many that you already have in place. What is your current ratio of educators and coordinators? Can you maintain that? Is that something that needs to change? And therefore, within that change, you know, is there streamlining of systems or processes? And, you know, can things be in place that actually make a difference to the budget as such? So that might be one of the areas that you may be considering. Professional development could be another area that you look at. Again, it influences the budget. So yeah, so what kind of development is being offered? You know, how frequent is it? Is it being outsourced? Is it in-house? And basically, how much does it cost? Keeping in mind that when we're putting professional development together, you know, it's not only the face-to-face that takes place, it's everything that goes into developing those training sessions as well. So, how often, how frequent, and basically how much does it take? Policy document review and development, it's another area that you might look at if you're doing a review of your service provision. That's part of what has to be. So how often are policies being reviewed? You know, with the old regulations, you know, that we had a time frame as such that we had to review all policies within. Well, the regulations now, I suppose, are broader in that sense, and some services are now doing it more on a need basis, recognising that they just don't have the time and the opportunity to do them more frequently as such. Some still put them on a schedule, but maybe stretch that schedule a bit longer than it has been in the past as well. So there's different ways of doing it, I suppose, but just being aware when you're reviewing the service, that might be something that you do look at. Administration could be reviewed as again part of the service, but a separate component. You know, what administration is taking place, how much time, you know, what is the cost involved there, and how much of that cost is then passed on to the educators or the families. It's been an interesting thing to again, in my travels, talk to sector representatives and those that have gone to or are moving towards, and inverted commas I say, a paperless system. So in other words, they're using more and more technology of receiving and sharing information and also recording the information and filing that information. So, you know, a lot of services are finding it far more efficient, and also it does, of course, I mean, the obvious costs are, you know, the less paper and ink that's being used, but it's also storage of records and a variety of things. So their efficiencies in that way, they're finding actually have meant, you know, cuts to their, not cuts to their budget, savings within their budget. So again, you know, that might be something that as part of a review you do look at. Family placements, that's another process that can be quite complex as such, you know, so the enrolment of families, of new families, the re-registration of existing families and the placement of children. Yes, again, can be quite a process and something that you may want to consider with the team, and particularly those involved in that, to see if there's opportunities for streamlining it. And again, using your network opportunities to listen to how others do it. And again, I'm hearing more and more of technology playing a part there. Educator induction is another thing that you may like to look at as part of your review. Again, processes, streamlining, looking at the educators, and I also did hear that more services would say that the new educators that they have coming on board often now have a qualification when they come to them. So, you know, factoring that into the induction process with some, like it's been a quality qualification as such, that not only has given a piece of paper but has given some, you know, good understanding of working with children and families, and some are now coming with more experience than before. So, you know, how is that reflected in our induction and orientation of new educators? Because we should be able to, if that is the case, you know, be able to cut back on some of the information that was delivered up front, you know. And again, as part of the review, what can be, or what's essential that educators know now as such, and what can, you know, come later. So, you know, they're just some of the areas. When I say review your service, yes, it's the big picture, but it needs to be broken down to manageable areas. Making decisions, definitely, that's part of it. If you're going to go through all of this, making decisions and implementing changes, you know, is important in so much as I said, time and energy going into the review of the service, so what's going to come with it. Evaluate and recalibrate. So in other words, taking that time at some stage to review. And it's interesting, often reviewing comes informally as such. You know, it'll be the discussion at staff meetings or around, you know, staff tables or things like that. And there's some informal reviewing and sharing and feedback, which is fantastic. When I look at that review process and the simple steps, I'm also reminded of your QIP, which has to be addressed at least once a year minimum. And I know a lot of services actually try and work with the QIP, the quality improvement plan, more closely than that. So I'm just thinking, you know, if you're going through a review process, please keep that QIP in mind as well, and make sure that your review is reflected there, because it's like, you know, don't reinvent the wheel as such, because that's what that QIP is really about. It's service review. So whatever way you decide to address your service review, make sure there's some matching up with the QIP down the track as well. I think that's a valuable part of the process. All right, the next slide just says a service review guide. Well, it does assist services to make decisions. You know, as this next point says, provides validations for decisions. Validation for decisions. We are accountable. That is so true. When we're making decisions, whether it be increasing fees to families or to educators, or if we're making reductions in our service provision in any way, there needs to be some reasoning for that. So, you know, what review processes have gone have these decisions gone through or been part of as such? You know, why have we made these decisions? And again, we are accountable and we need to be able to provide that information where the decisions have come from. It does encourage stakeholders to be involved, particularly if you kind of consider some of the ways I've just broken the service review down, whether it be family placements, educator induction, administration. You can see there's an opportunity for stakeholders to be involved. You know, so again, all stakeholders may not be, it may not be realistic for them to be involved in all of the review of the service, but definitely bring them in and get them involved in different components that particularly relate to them. It is proactive, as I said, rather. I always find being reactive can be pretty tiring actually, and you definitely have to be on the ball for that one. But proactively, when you can, you know, put a plan in place for reviewing the service, and it's not necessarily going to be a quick or easy thing, but definitely looking at it as, you know, an important way of addressing what's to come. And to me also, I will throw in there, whether you believe you will be eligible for funding in the future or whether you won't be, I think it's important to be reviewing the service, because I can just see that family daycare is changing once again. And I think that's a way of keeping abreast of the changes and just being prepared, because, you know, I suppose again being realistic about it, even services that feel they will be eligible for the funding could lose it at any time as well. So there is that level of uncertainty, so it's a matter of just looking at that and being prepared. It does promote short and long-term goal setting, because I think as soon as you go through a review process and you're having discussions with your stakeholders and getting feedback from them, I can just see that your lists can start pretty quickly, whether they be the things that you can address now or the things that might have to be addressed or changes made in the long term. So again, you know, I look at that and it just reminds me of the QIP, which is what it's really all about too. So this service review is really nothing out of the ordinary as such. It's just probably maybe going to be more specific than it has been in the past. The next slide has a bit of a table on it. It's a historical picture of the service. Now, this one has been taken from an idea from Wynnum Family Daycare, and again you can find this in their report on page 6. And there's a very interesting to look at, because of course it has the statistical information in it that they've shared with us. So what they did is gave a historical picture, and I think it's over 10 years of their service, you know, of the changes as such that the service underwent. I think a lot of times we do have this information, whether you're a newer service or a long existing service, often we have this information, but it's separate as such, so one year is separate to another. So I think as part of a review, this is probably not a bad strategy as such to collate that information, because what it will show is trends in what has taken place as such. And when there are figures and information in any of these columns, usually there's somebody around to explain, well, this is why we've got less educators there, and this is, you know, how we got more that year, or, you know, this is where our EFT was, this is where it grew to, and this is why. You know, so there's often a story to go with it as well. And again, I think in times when we can be slightly unsure about our future, whether again it's the sector in general or it's your service specifically, you know, this type of information can actually be reassuring, because we see, yes, change has brought about changes in how our service looks at different times, but we can also see the strengths there as well and where we've come from. So I suppose it is one of those situations sometimes to move forward you actually have to look back as well. When you're putting something like this together, you need a minimum of 3 years information. Being that gives you a point of difference. So 2 years probably, it's a good idea to start gathering it, but if you've got 3 or more, that just, like I said, just gives you a better picture, and it's good information also to be sharing with your stakeholders if you're explaining where you think the service could be in the future. So again, I can only encourage you to have a look at page 6 of the Wynnum report and see how they've done their review. The next slide talks about benchmarking. The purpose of benchmarking is to improve performance or services by identifying where changes can be made in either what's done or how things are done. Benchmarking is a tool we can use to continually learn and improve. Again, if you feel that in some ways you're isolated from other information about other services, we have provided in the publication you've been sent Creating Our Future, as I said, 8 different services prepared to give specific information regarding their service that we can then benchmark for you, and it's actually very clear to read and gather information, and it gives you an idea of ranges as well. And again, if you're sharing information with your stakeholders, it might be that you're discussing educator levies. Well, from that you might get a range of levies to discuss with the educators so they can see where their service sits as such. And again, with your team, that doesn't hurt either. And also the 10 case studies that are included in the publication give that opportunity for some benchmarking as well. And you can do it, as I said, if you're part of a networking group, or could see how you could start a networking group or become part of one. I can again only encourage you, because I suppose sometimes it gives us a better understanding of what's happening in the sector, and also maybe some confidence to move forward with the decisions we have to make. Okay, the next slide. This is a diagram of the SWOT analysis, and some of you may have been involved in a SWOT analysis before. I have found I've used them many times over the years for different reasons, but particularly when I've been in management positions of different services and decisions have to be made, or we're looking at setting goals within the team, or we're looking for direction, I suppose. I find this a fairly easy thing to do, and again, when we're looking at any of these review ideas, they are very simple, but what we're saying to you is that it might be of value to you in the future for the team that you work with. So the SWOT analysis is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So whether I know again, as I travelled around, I would do it with some of the groups that I worked with. So we would talk about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats for family daycare in general. And it might be that some put forward that the strengths of family daycare might be flexibility as such, that as a care and education model there was that opportunity to offer evening care or weekend care, 24-hour care, that type of thing. So some might say that flexibility was a strength. Some also, of course, put forward that one of the strengths was the model of family daycare itself, being that it was small groups of children in a home environment, and that as an option for the community it was very, very valuable and very important. Weaknesses, it's interesting, because whereas some service providers might say our flexibility is our strength, other service providers might say that actually inflexibility is our weakness, because it might be going on their experience that they're seeing more inflexibility within the educators that they're working with, or what can be provided. So they may have families coming to them asking if there is evening care available, or care till 7:30, or a Saturday care situation, something like that, and they're just not able to assist those families. So as I said, it's been an interesting conversation to have, and that's what it's all about, I suppose. I think another reason, with the SWOT analysis, the reason I like it too is because of that opportunity to have an honest discussion. Because when we talk about threats, and I mean the threat at the moment really is the loss of funding, or the reduction of funding to services that are going to receive the funding. The threat is that they could lose it at some stage. we seem to be in a more competitive situation in family daycare generally these days. Some service providers will say that, that there is a threat that they will lose families to other services, or they'll lose educators to other services. Some service staff may feel a threat because they're concerned about a cut or loss to funding, might mean cuts or even a loss of position. So, there's lots of concerns out there again, and I think it's not the worst thing to have them come out in the open and talk about them, because I think talking about them doesn't make them happen. It doesn't. It's not necessarily the catalyst. It's just giving everybody the opportunity to be heard. And again, with the SWOT analysis, it gives you the opportunity to discuss opportunities. So, okay, this is where we are now, this is what we're facing, but what can we take from it? Where's our ownership of possible change in the future? What can we make the best of? And opportunities, some service providers said, as hard as it was at the moment, it did give them an opportunity to review their service, sometimes feeling that they knew it was probably even long overdue, but they just hadn't had the chance, the opportunity, or again the catalyst, I suppose, to do it. So they saw service review as an opportunity for making changes if necessary and moving forward. Opportunities, and I definitely like to throw this one into the conversation when I was travelling around, that, having a look again at the information from the Productivity Commission report and also the information that's come from the government since then about nannies. Is there an opportunity for family daycare if families using nannies are going to be subsidised as such, and nannies need to be regulated? Is there an opportunity for family daycare to take that on as such and make the best of that? I found that people were in two minds about it generally. Some saw it, yes, as an opportunity, but I think we all kind of agreed too that we wanted more information about how it was going to be put in place, and also recognising that family daycare has come so far in the way of quality within the service and within the sector. Nobody wanted to compromise on that quality. So I suppose the jury's still out slightly on the nannies as everybody waits for a little bit more information. The other thing with this type of analysis, and again I think it's good for discussion, because often within these areas things can jump from one to the other, and as I would explain to groups, if we don't put nannies, for example, under opportunities, then it could move to threats if somebody else within other sectors takes that on and we miss that opportunity. So maybe there's a lost opportunity there, and maybe it even could be a disadvantage to us in the future. So as I said, a SWOT analysis is a very worthwhile way of reviewing the service, different parts of the service, or the service holistically, and just having that discussion. Now I haven't got a diagram, so I'll just speak while this one's here. I know a lot of times when I was talking to service providers as well, I even suggested a really basic thing to do was to get a blank piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, put essential on one side and additional on the other. And with your team, have the discussion about the service that you provide, what happens within your family daycare service, what things are essential, what are you not prepared to compromise on, what other things are additional as such. Because really, when we're pushed, and whether it be, because changes in regulations, changes in funding, whatever it can be, it's often those additional that we need to look at, and can we continue with them? Can we continue to maintain them? Can we, can we continue to sustain them, I suppose, in a financial sense? So are some of those things that need to go. And again, a worthwhile conversation with the team, because you will have different perspectives. For example, when we did that exercise as I travelled around New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania, play session or play group would often come up, and it usually came up on one side as being essential, But within the discussion, other service providers might actually want it placed on the additional. So in other words, some services were prepared to let go of their play session or play group for a variety of reasons, but usually coming back to finances as such and financing that. Other services were saying, though, that it was an essential part of how they supported educators and children in the service. It was, again, a very worthwhile discussion to have, in so much as what came out of it was what we saw as the commonalities with play session. So what were the important components, or what was the essence of play session that we wanted to retain that was essential? And often that was as I said, the support of the educators, it's meeting with the children, it was the staff having that opportunity to work with the educators and children in that in different environment. It was opportunity for children to be part of a different group, opportunities for educators to be networking and not be isolated. So they are all the things that when we talked about it and broke it down that service providers didn't want to let go of. So some saw that they could still afford to finance that, or would find a way to finance that in its traditional sense of, for example, educators coming to the coordination unit or wherever the play session was held. Other service providers were saying they could were no longer able to afford that. But because they wanted those, as I said, those important elements of play session, they were doing things like having play sessions in the park once a month or once a fortnight, or a coordinator would go and meet with a few educators in one educator's home and run a more informal play session in that way. Sometimes service educators were accessing community play groups, and a coordinator might catch up with them there. So there was a variety of things. So in other words, when we talk quality, there were ways of maintaining, again, essential parts of what's important about play session and what is involved in play session, but doing it in different ways as such. So, you know, again, worthwhile discussion, and it came about from that very simple method, as I said, drawing a line down a piece of paper and let's talk about what is essential and what's additional. And you'll see things sometimes, again, when you're talking with your team, move from one side of the paper to the other or be broken down. Another thing that was actually very interesting in some of those activities was things, for example, when the service provided resources for the educators. Some services may be providing car seats or mattresses or play equipment, that type of thing, particularly to new educators. And they would often say that they did it without a fee, so it became additional. And so then the discussion was around, well, if they placed a fee on it, could they continue with this, to offer that service to their educators and families, or whether it was time to let it go, you know, altogether. And again, recognising that it's not just the equipment and that itself, it's, you know, the maintenance of, and it's the recording of things coming and going, all those other things that happen behind the scenes. It's all have a dollar cost to them as soon as you have staff involved. So again, a very simple way of reviewing, which I can encourage you to do with the team at your service. The next slide refers to marketing. And as you can see what's happened there, it's really siloed into two areas as such, that looking at marketing or obtaining, maintaining and retaining educators, and also the same with families. Okay, so in other words, how do we bring new families on board? How do we bring new educators on board? You know, what kind of things have we got in place so those families and those educators get to know us and then want to be part of that service that we offer, want to be part of our family daycare service as opposed to anybody else's. So that obtaining, maintaining and retaining is very important. Again, through discussion with different sector providers, the majority of times, and you may agree with it, the majority of times it was said that word of mouth was the strongest form of marketing. Different service providers, you know, use a different array of methods of just say advertising in the paper or in school newsletters, putting things up in maternal child and health clinics, a whole range of ways of putting information out there. But when it really came down to it, word of mouth or the profile of family daycare or particular educators in the community. And as I would think you would also agree, a lot of the times educators bring new families on, or educators bring new educators on. Often that is the way it happens, or there'll be a good percentage of that happening in any one of our services. So although those two, as I said, are siloed down, if you look across to how do educators obtain families, how do educators maintain families as well? When we talk about maintain, we're really talking about that maintenance. And I think in respect of maintenance, we need to be putting a good effort in with our educators in respect of communication and also conflict resolution. Because of the close relationships they have with their families and those ongoing relationships we want them to have, we need them able to be communicating very clearly. And as you would understand, there's again, the families have the closest relationship with the educators, so the educators are sharing information that comes from the coordination unit. So, are they able to do that? Do they have a good understanding, and are they able to communicate in a clear and succinct way, I suppose? Also, again, back to maintenance, conflict resolution. Often when educators or services lose families, it's because there's been a breakdown in communication, or there's been missed opportunities for or lack of ability with conflict resolution. So I think really, looking at our educators and skilling them up in that respect so that we do maintain families, because and again, you probably have it where, you have an educator on the phone ringing, or a family ringing with a complaint as such, or approaching the service staff with a complaint because there has been that breakdown, and you just, you have to consider if the educators were more skilled in that respect, could things have been, addressed earlier or addressed in an effective way so that you're not putting out spot fires, or again, you're not losing families. Retaining them, again, the educators, and I've mentioned it in many sessions I go to, because I think it still not surprises me, but one of the things I love to talk about is the fact that, often educators will be invited to children that they looked after as they were little, invited to their 18th and their 21st and their weddings and things like that, or, families that have moved overseas or moved to different parts of the country that are still in contact with the educators that their children had. And this is what I say, that is actually very, very special and almost unique to family daycare, I would think. These strong relationships that don't necessarily happen in all sectors. And again, so the retaining, how are we supporting those strong connections? And I'm not suggesting that's going to happen with all families. That would not be realistic. But that those good relationships and the respectful and honest relationships go on for the amount of time that they really need to. So again, and how we, I suppose, too, building our relationships with the educators. And I must admit, as I travelled, I heard more and more of staff talking about the educators as part of their team. And I thought, that's a wonderful thing if educators can feel that way, because that's how we retain educators, and it's them understanding too, I suppose, what it is about their service that they connect with, and what their service offers them, I suppose. Do they understand that, and are there ways to really let them know why your service is, special and unique, as and different to other services. So making sure that we're sharing that information in a variety of ways. Okay, I think, is there another slide there, or is it question time? Yeah, just wondering if anybody has any questions, because I'm very happy to take them.
The only questions have been, some people have said that they've had issues hearing.
There, which is fine.
Can you hear me, Nikki?
Oh, okay.
And so maybe if you could move the speaker slightly. The other question was, I totally agree in your conflict resolution idea. As an educator, there are positions that even the best communicator that is placed in that they couldn't possibly imagine. A well set out list of how to deal with any conflict would benefit greatly.
Yes, yeah, great. I'm glad I'm not alone in thinking that then. As I said, that's the maintaining part, maintenance. It is just that. What maintenance has to happen at times, and that's just realistic. Conflict will be part of life and any relationship that we're in. So it's a matter of being able to address that and skilling educators. As I said, so they feel empowered, I suppose, and they don't always feel they need to get on the phone to, the coordinators or the staff, to come and assist them as such, that they've given things a go themselves. And look, I'm speaking very, very generically there. I'm not saying all educators do that. Some do an amazing job on a daily basis, navigating the relationships, the different relationships they have. But definitely, if you can see that's part of your service, then yeah, that's the communication and conflict resolution, training opportunities or support you may want to put in place. Okay, so we will move right along. Again, just looking at the time and options to consider. So the next two parts, options to consider and also the financial matters. As I said, there's a lot more information in the books that you've been posted, Creating Our Future. So I'm going to pretty much skim the surface of this information because I'm going to be encouraging you to go and have a look at those books more closely and, as I said, share the information with the staff and definitely start the discussion with your stakeholders. So again, I'll just put some of this forward and we'll see how we go with that. Customers do not care how much it costs the business, they care about how much it costs them. Oh, I think that's very true actually, and as a consumer as such, I think most of us would agree with that as well. And that's not to say, if we look at that in respect of family daycare, that it means that families as the customers don't care about family daycare business, because I think they do. I think they very much care about the relationships that their children have with the educators and what happens within that care and education environment in the home as such. If you ask though most families, I think, about the business of the coordination unit, I would think a lot of them wouldn't know a great deal about it, and probably their knowledge and understanding of the service that is provided by the coordination unit would be very limited. I think, again, educators have these strong relationships and communication with the families. So if we ask the educators what do they know about the service, the coordination unit and the work of the team there, and the support that's offered, would they be able to really explain it as well? So is there an opportunity there for us in the way of, again, profile, which is very, very important, sharing more information with them? And I know some service providers are looking at the opportunity when educators are re-registered, whatever time that might happen in your service. I think the majority would be the beginning of the year. When educators are re-registered, also giving them information, whether it be like a list or something similar of the support that they're offered. And again, in light of the fact that you may have an educator levy, you may be increasing the educator levy, or you may be implementing an educator levy, do educators really know what they get for that money? And do they really understand the support that is offered? I think a lot of times educators, when asked about those levies, will say, well, we get our timesheets done, or they'll relate it directly to that level of administration. So do they really understand all the other support that happens? And even when we talk about fees soon, I will mention that some services are placing a fee on the safety audit that's done, whether it be initially for new educators or the 12-monthly one that's done as part of the regulations. So if you're not imposing that fee, do educators still recognise that that does actually come as a cost to the service, and through doing it, because it is regulated, it allows them to, you know, to keep their business open as such. So really making a list of what is provided in the service, because all of those things actually have a dollar component to them. They all have a cost to the service. So that's why sometimes fees need to be introduced or raised as such. Yeah, so again, I think parents do very much care as the customers about the business of family daycare and what they directly know about it, but perhaps it's time to share a little more about what else happens. And also within that, again, what you're doing is sharing information about your service, what makes your service special as such, what makes it stand out, again being that we are in a competitive market, and service providers will say they have concerns about educators moving to other services, and that, well, you know, spell it out, I suppose, what is offered to them. Okay, so the next slide just has, again, alludes to those 4 areas or options as such that we'll address. So I'll go straight on to the next slide, Vicky, thanks. Reducing costs. Review service efficiencies, particularly in relation to staff hours and tasks, and where can dollars be saved. Again, looking at all areas of service provision, there is a cost to it. You know, quality as such does come at a cost, but our perception of quality or our take on quality may vary. Are you carrying out activities or offering services that could be considered non-essential in tough times? And again, that goes back to that simple review process of starting with a blank page and 2 columns. Are you working harder or smarter? Well, probably at this time of year you feel you're working very, very hard and ready for a bit of a break, which is totally understandable. And I have said to other groups, and I will say now, that as I've travelled around and had numerous conversations with many sector providers, staff, managers, whoever, there's a lot of intelligent people in family daycare, which is absolutely fantastic, and probably one of the reasons that it has only grown in strength and definitely in quality over the years. So, you know, I'm always very impressed by that. When we're talking about reducing costs, I've just got a few notes here, so I'll refer to them, some of the, I suppose, the ideas as such. You know, break down the coordinator's role into allocations of time. Now, when we say the coordinator's role, I suppose I'm addressing that one first, but we know that the greatest cost to the service as such is staff hours, staff wages. So it's a matter of reviewing them, and it may be the teams collectively. As such, if you have a team of coordinators or a couple of coordinators, you know, having a look at theirs separate to the administration staff or the manager themselves, yourselves, you know, however it might be, so that breaking it down into different roles and responsibilities. Back to coordinators though, you know, having a look at what an average visit is. So, you know, is an average visit, just say it might be that the coordinator spends an hour with the educator and the children, you know, on a face-to-face visit, but then, you know, you factor in travel time, and if you factor in administration time and also perhaps follow-up, what might seem like an hour visit is actually 2.5, maybe even 3 hours on average. So, you know, really putting that information together and nutting out what it is. So therefore, when you look at staff hours and allocation of educators within that, you know, what ratio have you already got in place? Does that need to change? Can it be maintained? Is there some equality there, or does change need to come about to bring equality into the situation? And I'm well aware too, having worked as a coordinator myself, that, you know, when you have new educators coming on board or educators going through, you know, more difficult times or challenging times with children or families, whatever it may be, you know, that they may need a different level of support than other times. But, you know, as I said, really breaking down that role and what is manageable and what is the ratio. And some services that have done that and are able to talk about ratios now have also been able to, through review processes, see how perhaps that ratio could be maintained or changed if it needed to, even stretched out a bit further because they've made efficiencies in other areas. And speaking of which, some services that are now using iPads, the coordinators are using iPads for their visits, are saying that that has been, you know, a wonderful thing for moving forward because it does streamline the processes of putting information together, sharing information with families, again sharing it back with the educators, also you know, putting that information on record as it's meant to be on some recording system. So yeah, so they've really moved forward from that. I've only heard so far in my discussions of one service that introduced the iPads, and it didn't go so well as such, but every other service that is working with that type of system with their staff are saying that how effective it has been and how the staff have taken to it, but also the educators. That's the other thing I'm hearing, that more and more educators, when they're seeing how the tablets can be used, or computer systems or programs can be used, yeah, how it's really supporting their work as well, and they're moving forward with their own record keeping and programming that. Some services, when they're looking at staff roles and responsibilities and the hours, again, being that it is your larger costs and sometimes changes might need to be made, are sometimes putting in place a timing motion, in which case the staff are making a note of, just say, every 15 minutes, using 15-minute increments, what they're doing during the day. I would think if you're going to go through that process, you'd probably be at least putting 2 weeks' worth of information together as a minimum, only that gives you a very, very good picture. And anybody who's been through a time in motion activity strategy, and it's definitely part of a review of the service, will know that it's actually can be a bit boring as such to do and repetitive. But if staff know that it's only for a short period of time, it is to gather actual information to work with as such, that, as I said, gives a picture of how their day, their week looks, and what's included in that, what is expected of them. Is it realistic? Could more be done? Are there gaps in the day or the week where there might be other opportunities to take on different roles, whatever it might be? But at least, again, when you're making decisions and perhaps making changes, you have got some basis for them, some basis to work from. Some services are looking at the frequencies of visits to educators, and of course, again, we often have informal processes involved there, whereas new educators will get more frequent visits than others for a period of time, or those that need more support at different times receive it. But some services are looking, I suppose, like at a more formalised scale of support, I would call it, where they're saying, okay, look, the majority of our educators get visited once every 3 weeks, but in light of, yes, we're going to have funding cuts and changes to our budget, can we maintain that? And okay, the educators do need support, but can those visits be stretched out to 4 weeks or 5 weeks for the educators that, you know, go along well, you know, cease at training, come to play session, get involved in other ways. And also, not that a phone call or email or anything replaces a visit. I'm not suggesting that at all. And again, through my work as a coordinator, the majority of care happens at home, so the majority of visits should happen at home as well, I believe. But also, when we talk about support, you know, support isn't just that face-to-face visit. It's also the opportunity to catch up on an excursion or make the phone call or, you know, have the emails or whatever. So again, if there's some way of recording that information, we'll actually see that, particularly with some educators more than others, there's actually quite a bit of communication over the period of time. So again, with a scale of support, might be new educators, might need weekly visits, you know, more experienced educators that we've had for a period of time who work very cooperatively cooperatively with the service might be able to be stretched out further. We might have a second layer there somewhere of 2 or 3 weeks, something like that, and that might be educators again going through tough times, or those educators that push the boundaries of compliance, that, you know, we feel we need to do some closer supervision of at times, you know, maybe they're on that second level. So again, sometimes we haven't done it informally, but is there an opportunity to have a more formal scale of support, again, to support our decision making as well. Another point, you know, a lot of services are saying they're having more educators coming to them with experience and qualification than they've had in the past. But I'm just thinking, in light of that, and in a large part of the country, you know, the ratios are now have changed to 1 to 4. They have been different, but are now, you know, we're all working with the 1 to 4. You know, but have services made changes again to the support of educators in light of that? We're hoping that they're coming with a quality qualification, or they're gaining one in the time with us. And I think, and again, travelling, I've heard a variety of different stories in relation to that. But, you know, I think that should in some way be reflected in how we are supporting the educators, and I suppose what our expectations are of them, and what onus that we are putting on them in the way of gathering information from other means as well. Just looking at my notes, other things here. The orientation process, again, I did mention it before, but looking at how much time is allocated over how many weeks. You know, this is the orientation of new educators. Again, what is the onus on the service staff, and what is the onus on the new educator coming on board? A lot of services have had things in place, I suppose, but it has been part of their review, and for a variety of reasons, particularly if they're looking at how much time staff are taking working with new educators. Again, understanding that, you know, there's a dollar cost to all of that. What resources are available? Sometimes there's packages. There's some really good packages of information out there for orientation. So if you have something, that's wonderful, but if you don't, you might try and source something, or see if you can network with others that have it. Again, thinking that we don't need to reinvent the wheel sometimes. Some of those packages are cleverly done too, so that if you do have an educator coming on with training or experience, then you can just pick out the bits that and individualise their orientation. Training and PD, that's another area that there's a possibility for reduction in costs. Some services are actually do a lot of in-house but don't charge the educators, but is there an opportunity for placing a fee on it? Again, whether your service is developing their own or outsourcing it, there is a cost to it. Opportunities for networking as far as training and PD goes as well, so that if you're putting something together, perhaps, you know, can you invite another service, therefore they might be able to reciprocate down the track. Services that were maybe putting together a calendar of training that might have something on every month are now looking at, is that feasible? Can they continue to do that? And how well is that being, you know, what's the participation rate with that as well? Can, you know, is it sustainable as such? And again, within contracts, some service providers are putting forward their expectations to educators, and it might be that educators attend training that is either provided by the service or that they can outsource themselves or source within other areas. And again, sharing of training packages. If you've had staff within your service put something together, is there an opportunity to use networks to share it? You know, it might be that you've put something together on nutrition and somebody else has something, some other service has something on programming. You know, can you do a swap? So that therefore, again, and I know as somebody who develops training packages, often I've delivered them once only, yet it might have been quite a bit of time and therefore money spent on putting something together that is never reused. So is there an opportunity for sharing and therefore, you know, reducing costs down the track? Some services employ the educators rather than following the self-employment or contract model. And as participants, some of you may be aware of that or actually involved in that type of a system as such. My knowledge on it is not great. I had an interesting discussion with a service provider who shared how they did it with their not-for-profit service, and their educators had always been employed, so it wasn't as if they were making changes to their arrangements as such. These educators had always been employed by the service. But they were paid, they were employed under an enterprise agreement. There was, this is, as I said, using an example of the service provider, there was a $10 administration fee per family, but there was no educator levy. Just having a look here, the educators received superannuation and all leave entitlements, such as annual leave and sick leave. The educators were paid on an hourly rate, and this service provider said in this situation that it was equivalent to a level 3 in a childcare centre. I would think, though, that would then depend on their qualification, though, and also that left, because as we know, educators will work different hours, and some will work maybe 3 or 4 days a week, but not necessarily 5. So that's how that was varied. I must admit, what she did explain to me, one of the benefits was that although the educators did the timesheets as they have to do, sign on, sign off with the families, their administration tasks were lessened, and therefore the expectation was that they had a greater focus on the children. So they saw that as one of the advantages, which was interesting. So again, opportunities to look at different models, and we do have a little bit more information in the Creating Our Future, the publication that's come out to you. Family placement processes, definitely another area that perhaps can be an opportunity for reducing costs, in so much as it's just streamlining processes. I find with those, with the placement of families, often information is double or triple handled. So is there an opportunity for streamlining that in some way, and also how much information is available to families, just say on your website or email to them, so that if they are coming for an interview or you're meeting them for an interview in their home or at the educator's home, that that they have information filled out, that you can just move on from there. So often there are only small things, and we recognise that small things don't necessarily make up for what your loss could be if you are losing CSP funding or having it cut to any degree. But what we're saying is, if you're going to go through the review processes, there may be an opportunity for some of these changes, so that it's not just a matter of, well, we're just going to increase levies and we're just going to cut staff hours, but actually there's a variety of things that we're going to do after we've gone through this review. Okay, the next slide is increasing income. And again, fees and charges or levies. Although options may be limited, increasing fees and levies is not taken lightly, as it impacts educators and families, remembering that 50% of increases may be offset by the childcare rebate. So if the increase is to the family, there could be an opportunity for offsetting that with the childcare rebate. If the increase is, of course, to the educator, there could be a chance for them to offset that again with their tax return. So just being aware that and I suppose talking in real terms with your stakeholders as well. Yes, this might be the amount on face value, but the reality of it is that, yes, again, there may be rebates or tax reductions there involved. Service providers should consider the best way to implement increases while reassuring educators and families of the value and quality of what's offered. And I think that's an important thing, because at this stage it might be that you are increasing some of your fees but also reducing services. So again, reminding educators and families particularly, and the stakeholders, the other stakeholders, the community and your sponsoring bodies, of the value of your service and what you do offer. Yes, you are going through this process of change as such, but there is still, great strength in what you do and the quality of what you offer. In respect of this, again, I've just got a little bit of information in front of me that I'll share with you now, and I suppose in the way of benchmarking as well, just some ideas. In respect of families, families are sometimes charged levies that are based on per hour per child or per day or per week. And the survey or the information we gathered showed that they're usually between, or it's a range of 50 cents to 90 cents per hour. Enrolment fees may or may not be imposed as a one-off fee or an annual fee. So families may be asked to pay an initial enrolment fee, that covers supposedly administration costs, or annually are charged a fee for being part of that service. And again, the information we gathered might be that, that it did range from $0, so not all services are doing that, to $80 per child or family. Sometimes families are being charged for transportation of children. So in other words, the educator might charge them if they're doing preschool pickups, drop-offs, school-aged children pickups, that type of thing. Educators may charge families if they attend play session with their children. They may also put forward an excursion levy. And again, this might be a one-off per year, or it might be per excursion. So that goes directly to the family. The service, though, may implement a waiting list fee of families that they have on their waiting list. I think with some of these things, or most of these things, it's always worthy of discussion, and you will find more information in the publication, but you yourself know the market or the community that you work within and that you derive your educators and families from, and decide, which ones best suit you, if any. In respect of educator levies, they could be paid per week, per percentage of income, annually, per day of operation, per timesheet, or per child in care. And these are just examples of different ways that services may be implementing the educator levy. And so, in other words, there wasn't one stock standard way. From what I did here, the percentage of income often meant a greater amount of income in that respect, I suppose. Again, your service needs to consider some of these options means that the income will, from any educator, will, I'm sorry, I've just lost the word there, but it won't be static as such, that it will change or fluctuate is the word I was looking for, and therefore, that may not be suitable for your service. You may need to know exactly what the income is going to be for your projected budgets as such. And other services felt that they could actually work with that. Some services say that instead of charging just a direct fee of all educators, that doing something like per day of operation meant that if an educator worked 3 days, well, their fee was based on that rather than 5 days. Other services felt that it didn't matter whether educators worked for 3 or 5 days, that they still needed, still needed pretty much the same level of support and administration and other things put in place. So therefore, they felt that just a straight fee across all educators was warranted. Educators may be charged to attend play session, and again, this would probably then flow on to their families. They'll put that back to their families. Induction or orientation fees, sometimes this will be charged of educators, sometimes not. Training or PD, as I said, it may be an annual fee or a per session attended fee. Some services do charge an annual registration. There might be a transportation fee if educators don't have transport and the service has to assist them with that. Some services have a late timesheet fee in place, but as I understand it, you actually don't want that bringing in much in the way of income, because that means that there may be problems in that area of your service, or a lot of chasing up being done that can be a waste of time and energy as such. So Anything like that, it's not really to make an income out of, but it's a change of behaviour that you're after. So just being aware of that difference. And I think I did mention before a residence inspection fee. Some services may be charging educators, new educators, for the initial audit, safety audit, or the ongoing audits that are done as part of regulations. So they're just some ideas, and again you'll find many, many more within the publication that you've been sent. The next slide is option 3, again increasing income by other means. And travelling around and having the conversations again, some service providers have come up with small ways of bringing different income in, or income through other means, to their service. It's worth considering, and again putting out to the team, and you might get some great ideas back. But of course, with anything like that, you have to weigh what you have to put in the way to get some sort of an income out, and is it worthwhile in the short or long term. Some of them, very large services, may have gone towards becoming an RTO. Again, being aware that although it may be compatible as such with what we do in family daycare, and the fact that we have so many staff that do need, staff and educators that need to be qualified, it is a very complex process to take on, and a complex business, I suppose, if you're looking at it in that respect. So, and definitely smaller services wouldn't probably entertain the idea. They're probably stretched already with what they have to do, but it's just an interesting thing to know that is how sometimes other services have looked to bring in other revenue to also support what they do. Some services who have play session areas or playgroup areas are seeing that they're often underutilised. Maybe they're only used in the morning, a few mornings a week, if that. So they're looking at what other groups that they can invite in. And keeping in mind too, sometimes with this, yes, you might be able to charge something for other, just say, community play groups or special play groups, whatever it might be, to use your service and use your facilities. There might be a small fee that comes in, but the benefits actually might be long term, because they're coming to see what you have to offer, getting to know you, because what we actually want down the track, of course, is for these families to become our family daycare families, or even our family daycare educators. So although the income on face value may not be great, the benefits long term could be. So sometimes that is worth considering. I'm just looking at the list here of other ideas. Oh, another area too, some services have scaled back over the years. They might have underutilised office space as well, so they're looking at are there opportunities to get other allied or other support agencies or professionals into those areas, so that, yes, again, there's rent coming in that respect, but also again, if it was allied to the service we already offered, that can be of great benefit as well, such as a speech pathologist or an OT, somebody like that. Some services are looking at grants that are available in their community, and it may not be, again, it's not so much as way of direct income, but if you have things that you want to put in place, projects or certain things that you want to address, that might be a way to bring in some funding to support them. Yeah, so a few ideas there, but again, networking opportunities there and working with your team might bring about some new ideas. Option 4 was merge and amalgamate, and that's the next slide. So a little bit of information. A merger is the fusion of two or more services, and it's a process in which the identity of one or more entities is lost. An amalgamation is blending together two or more services in a fashion that both lose their identities and a new separate entity is born. It's not something you probably hear or see a lot of, but having said that, this has been happening over the years, for different reasons as such. The amalgamation or the merging of services, that first point, it says the potential to grow is the prime motive. That is true, and sometimes it's the opportunity to remain viable or to keep a service going, as we would well know. So yes, there is some movement as such within the sector with different services looking at this, and it may be family daycare services amalgamating or merging, or whether family daycare is merging with another service type or agency as such. So I think the thing with it is, it's something services may consider. It would be, not that it can't happen, but there would be quite a bit involved in it. You know, it can be quite complex as such. So if you are considering it, and again, we've got a little bit of information in our Creating Our Future, but also I think this would be good if you did contact the peak body in your state or territory and asked if they can put you in touch with services that have gone down this line and have been through the processes as such. So if it was something you were considering, that you are able to talk to somebody who's been through it to, you know, talk about the advantages and disadvantages, and you know, the what you need to know if you're thinking about it. All right, so I think we've got a little break now, Ricky.
Okay, sounds good. Maybe we could reconvene in about 5 minutes?
Well, we probably don't have much time because I think we're nearly finished.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we are. Now, I didn't know if it was question time or not, but I'll just put it in there. Are there any questions at this stage, or because we are getting closer to the time?
No, there are no further questions, unless someone wants to type any in and we can answer them now. Maybe I can let you know closer to the end, at the end if there have been any more. Okay.
All right, yep, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, so the next slide, financial matters. So we move on to the break-even budget. And as I did say, I was just really going to skim the top of this just to show you what is in the guide that we'd sent out to you. It does refer to a break-even budget. A break-even is the point where a business makes no profit and no loss. It can be used to determine what volume of sales or service you need to get over before making a profit. Services, I'm sure, approach budgets in different ways, and as I said, I'm aware that sometimes you know, managers or service providers, you know, those of you working in the coordination units have, you know, you have different influence or different relationships with the budgets depending on your situation as such. But a budget is essential for all services, and again, if we're going to be making decisions about our future and making changes, well, this will be one part of the review that's essential for the service. So in the guide there is information on what a break-even budget is. On the next slide there's some classifying costs, and what it talks about is the difference between variables and fixed costs. Variables being the cost that it may take to offer the service as such, but those things that, just as it suggests, can vary. Okay, so it may be some service providers will put staff wages in there, but it might be okay, there's a certain amount of staff that are needed to run the service, but we do have additional staff, or we have casuals or relief workers, whatever it might be. So the variables might go in there. The fixed costs, though, being those resources, as it says, that are needed to support a certain level of activity. So in other words, the things that have to be included in service provision and can't be overlooked, and therefore, you know, their costs are fixed. We don't have too much movement with those. So it explains the difference between the two. The next few slides, Ricky, if you wouldn't mind just taking us through them. What it then does is provides these tables, and this is the same example. It's based on 57 educators, and it looks at a way of breaking down the costs well, ascertaining, I suppose, the costs of the service in relation to what are variable, what are fixed. You know, looking at the 57 educators, as the example shows, how much then it takes, I suppose, to run the service, and therefore how much revenue is needed before from each educator. Now, it's very, very simply done, and it is spelt out in more detail in the publication. Also, on the inside of the cover, or the last page, is a template for working with this this formula, I suppose, because what we want to come up to on the very last table, Ricky, if you wouldn't mind jumping through to that, you can just see, like I said, it's hard to do this. Yeah, that previous one, thank you. Calculating revenue required per educator, that's what it takes you to. So going through that process of maths as such, and putting those figures together, the required revenue per educator is what you come up with. And again, I mean, as we know, this might well be based on one educator working 5 days a week, and we can then use that as a basis to do pro rata, or put pro rata information in. So in other words, if an educator works 3 days, well, it's dividing that by 5 and timesing it by 3. You know, just putting those things into place so we can make it more relevant to our service and the actual hours of educator service that's being offered. So again, that's already put in place, and it's used. The 57 is an example for you, but the template is there for you to also, you know, maybe photocopy and have a play with yourself to come up with some figures. So thanks, Ricky. I'll move on to the next part. Other related topics, and again, just skimming the surface in so much as sponsor support. Some services do work with the sponsors, and you probably are aware within the sector, across the sector, you know, at this time of uncertainty and more change and possibility of services losing funding that they've had for many years in place, some sponsors are considering whether they will continue to support family daycare in the future. So this is a reality for you know, some parts of the sector. So what we've kind of suggested, and again there's more in Creating Our Future, is that you do put some review of your service into place so that you can go to your sponsor and discuss it, the financials, and also what changes and ideas and goals you might have for the future. So again, it's a proactive approach. Rather than perhaps the review being taken out of your hands, that you're definitely having an influence on it, or getting the ball rolling. And also that last point, being clear of the advantages of offering family daycare to your community, because I always think there was a reason that that sponsor started with family daycare in the first place. So is it a time to remind them of how that started, and the fact that family daycare is still you know, an important and well, it's important or critical option of care and education within the community, and therefore, you know, it should continue to be supported. The next slide refers to unmet demand, I believe, and again, relevant to those services who believe they will be eligible for funding in the future. All services that put in an application have to attach documents which provide information on the unmet demand of children's services in their area, keeping in mind that's not just family daycare, that's children's services across the board. So you would be looking at families that may be requiring, again, evening care, weekend care, school-age care, opportunities for just occasional care or respite care. The department has suggested that you can put information together on your waiting list and other services waiting lists, and again, not just family daycare, but across the board. Some service providers have already started this process of gathering that information, but be aware that if you do contact a service and that they're not prepared to share with you what information they have about their waiting list, I would think that you should be documenting that as well, because if the department's asked you to collate this information in whatever way you can, then you probably need to show that you've done your best to gather that particular information, but you've hit a brick wall for whatever reason. your own waiting list, as we would all know too, your own waiting list might look like whatever it does. Often educators have been approached directly by families though. So educators may have a bit of their own waiting list that happens that's slightly different to what you have. So making sure you also are, again, having that communication with your educators so you're getting a true picture of where your service is up to if you're putting in an application. You know, some educators might have, you know, a family that has 3 days a week, but the family are really wanting 4 days a week, or they want the new baby in next year, whatever it might be. So that might not be reflected in your waiting list, but it's still there. So make sure you gather that information. But I can only encourage you, if you're going down this path, not to just leave it to waiting lists. The department has also suggested that you look at projected, the projected future, I suppose, of your community. In other words, what industries might be coming, what growth there might be, what needs of the community there might be. So it's a bit of a project to gather information, I suppose, from local councils, local government, and it may be that you have to approach them directly, and often councils will have information of that sort available on their websites too. So yeah, just really, and also stretching your network for as far as you can to get ideas on how to gather this information, and also what supports this information as well. The next slide. Actually, Ricky, we'll just skip through these to the second last slide, which is about more information. As you can see there, Creating Our Future, we have mentioned that it has been sent to you, or you can access it on our website as a PDF. If yours doesn't turn up in the mail, please contact somebody from the project and let them know, and something will be sent out to you. Family Daycare at the Crossroads, Quality and Sustainability in Uncertain Times. That was a report put together by the University of New South Wales to, again, support the project and support the sector for where it is. It's an interesting report to read. They also had conversations with sector representatives and gathered a variety of information. And it is available on our website, as is Women Family Daycare Journey to Excellence. Again, the report that I've referred to a few times, and we do thank them for allowing us to put that up on the website and to share it with you. New South Wales, Western Australia and Queensland, we've got the web addresses for those small business groups. Having said that, you may know of other network opportunities there. Often those government-supported organisations, though, do have some good, I suppose sometimes they have good strategies for review, ideas that they may have, and also templates that you can use. So whether they're worth contacting or, again, having a look at their websites. The last slide refers to our project information and where you can contact us. And of course, we do have an email address. There is a phone number there. If the phone's not manned at that time, you can leave a number or ask to speak to somebody else, and somebody will get back to you when they possibly can. And of course, the website, as I said, keep an eye on that, because we will be putting other things into place to support the family daycare sector through the 6 months of next year, as we kind of lead up till the end of June. So that's probably enough for me. I'm feeling like I've talked quite a bit. Can I ask again, are there any last questions, or are there any comments you would like to make?
Nikki, someone said, I would like to know more about the progress tackling the new regulation banning family daycare educators from sending their children to other family daycare services when other women in early childhood education are sending exempted. Nikki, did you hear that? Nikki?
So that was relating to family daycare educators using other family daycare educators to care for their children.
Yeah.
Is that what that one was about, Ricky?
I can read it to you again. I would like to know more about your progress tackling the new regulation banning family daycare educators.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, I'll just make sure.
Okay, so I would like to know more about your progress tackling the new regulation.
Okay. Well,
Nikki, can you hear me?
okay. Well, as you say, it is just new to us, and within the parameters of the support project, I don't know if it's something necessarily we will be tackling. And I don't know if Ricky or Trina have more information about this, but like I said, I suppose within what we do in the project, we have to work within the parameters we've been given, and perhaps this will be outside of them, being that it is a new regulation as such, and ours is more relating to the eligibility criteria for the CSP funding. So I only have a bit of information about that myself, because I'm not working with working directly with the family daycare service myself. I've only kind of gleaned from conversations I've had what's been put out there. But if you are part of New South Wales, definitely you might want to be in touch with New South Wales Family Daycare as your peak body, or if you're in other states or territories, you might be wanting to contact, your peak bodies and just asking for more information about it in that respect. But definitely, from the little bit I know and I've heard, definitely another curveball, I suppose, that family daycare's been thrown that they have to deal with.
Thank you so much for your time, Nikki. I think we might finish the webinar there. For people who had issues with the sound, we will be placing the webinar online, so you should be able to hear it there in total. Thank you so much, Nikki.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.